All right, we're live.
We are live. This is the fun part, just watching the attendees number just skyrocket. It's like real-time feedback. People are tuning in. We're not just going to talk to ourselves. This is great.
That's always good news.
I know, right?
It's definitely a first for me, though. I've done plenty of conferences, but sitting here talking to the computer like this, yeah.
Yeah, I know it is. This is part of the new normal, right? We got 95, 96. We're about to break 100. Here we go. Welcome to everyone tuning in. So glad you're here. Really appreciate you guys taking the time. Allison Nichols, thanks for joining in. Who else we got? Yeah, who's some shout outs, guys? We Cheryl, Chris Kearns, welcome. Deborah Smith, Ed Quam. 2 weeks in a row, Ed. Man, you get the gold star, buddy. I like it. I appreciate that. That's good. Let's see, who else? We got 109. That's good. Kim Land, so glad to see you, Kim. See that you've tuned in here.
Alfredo in the house.
Yeah, Alfredo.
We can't see this. We can just see the chat, though.
Right.
And Kevin, too. I got you, Kevin.
I love it. I love it. This is so great. Gathan,
Leroy, your
Kentucky.
beard really
Where's
does
the
look
bourbon?
nice.
Yeah. Where is the bourbon?
Appreciate that.
So obviously waiting on a few more to get started here. Tune in. Leroy, where are you at today? Just give us a tune in. You probably got the best view, I think, out of all of us, wouldn't you?
Unfortunately, it's gotten really humid and hot here, so I'm not on my back patio looking at my pool here in St. Pete, Clearwater, Florida. But I'm actually now just holed up in my bedroom because I don't have a fancy bookcase like you. I didn't have time to build one during quarantine.
Hey, but Gathan loves the quarantine beard game you got going on there, so that's good.
Working on it, that's for sure.
I love it. I love it. Andy, what about you? You got the wood chipper nearby?
No, not next to my house or anything, but we've been having a fun little intermittent snowstorms.
Wow.
It's a different kind of view.
Different kind of view. Wow,
Yeah.
we got the heat and the snow. Ted, what about you?
Enjoying DC spring right now. A little cool today, but otherwise beautiful.
That's fantastic. Becca, what about you? Where are you today?
I am in Tallahassee, Florida. So Florida's capital city, and it's nice and 58 degrees out. Enjoying it.
Well, this is, man, we got 174. Let's see, are we going to crack 175 total, 169 attendees? I think we're going to crack 200. I'm feeling strong about that. What about you guys?
Yeah, it's going up.
This is fantastic. Well, let's get started. Let's dive in.
Yeah.
Becca, what are we doing?
All right. Well, as Josh said, so excited to have so many familiar names that we're seeing. We see lots of numbers too who just called in, but welcome everybody. Welcome to our second marketing webinar from our Connect Travel webinar series called Staying Connected. I'm Becca Smith. I am the Senior Director of Marketing and Events for Connect Travel. We're happy to bring this series to you. Today, our panelists bring their varying perspectives on parsing the new normal in destination marketing. As you have questions, please submit those through the Q&A function. You also feel free to chat. We've seen some really fun chats coming through. Anything you chat will be seen by everybody unless you send that directly to the panelists. So really, we hope that these weekly webinars will keep you connected to peers and allow you to hear different perspectives from our industry. Another great way to stay engaged also is to subscribe to the Travel Vertical. The Travel Vertical is a free weekly B2B newsletter focused on thought leadership and marketing innovation within destination management and marketing organizations. And you can subscribe at thetravelvertical.com. So someone else that you should really be connected to is our moderator, Josh. As you've heard from him, he is a TEDx alum, experienced architect, and also leads the Vibrant Destination Accelerator team at Streetsense. So welcome, Josh.
Yay, thanks, Becca. So glad to be back, and just love everything. So a couple quick housekeeping notes. If you haven't put us on gallery view so you can see all of our faces, that might be a good tip for you. It's a little easier to engage that way. Of course, we got the chat. We've got the Q&A. If you've got questions already, you're thinking about things from either last week's webinar that we didn't get to, or you've got new ones, you want to pop that in there, we'll get to those for sure. But yeah, just what a gift that you would all tune in here. And I mean, I just think this is one of the best communities of any industry. Certainly, I've worked in lots of different industries, live entertainment, music, performance, all kinds of different stuff. But this is easily one of the best industries I've ever been in. And so much of that is because of all of you tuning in and getting together, sharing ideas, even now remotely and virtually together. Helping one another. I mean, that's just incredible. I love it. So it is a gift, and I mean that. Glad to have a new panel this week. Andi, Leroy, Ted, so glad y'all are here. Andi, why don't you kick us off and just, you know, tell us a little bit about yourself, what this new normal is like for you, obviously where you're from and what that looks like, and we'll go from there. And then followed by Leroy and then Ted.
Sounds good. Well, I am from Fargo-Moorhead. We do have the infamous wood chipper. It sits in our office. I'm missing it right now, and all the people who come in and push the foot down. Yeah, you know, for us, it's really just been the new normal is rolling with the punches to a certain extent, keeping up and talking a lot with partners and shifting into this new world that is virtual and digital. So that's really kind of what our focus has been. We're getting into those phases of what does moving forward look like, and that's kind of, I guess, what today is all about. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, Leroy, I mentioned coming to you from St. Pete, Clearwater, Florida. You know, for us, yeah, first of all, acknowledging all of the DMOs and partners and agencies and everybody of the difficult time that everybody's experiencing. I think our hope is to talk. Maybe take you to a certain degree an hour away from all of that and talk about the future and kind of how we're trying to navigate right now and into the future. But we, you know, certainly my heart goes out to a lot of people during this tough time. We've been fortunate so far at St. Pete Clearwater, in St. Pete Clearwater. And one of the things we're looking at and we've done is launched a Brighter Days Ahead marketing, kind of bridge marketing campaign for our partners. An unbranded effort so that really anybody within the destination can get behind that. And that's been one of the big things early on for us to help give an umbrella platform for all of our partners, our 24 municipalities, all of our hoteliers, attractions and whatnot to get behind it. Really pushing that positive message of brighter days ahead, obviously tying into our beautiful sunshiny destination.
I love that. Ted?
Hey, Ted Evers here with TripTuner. Began my journey in online travel 20 years ago at a company called Site 59, and we actually had an office that was, you know, down in right near the World Trade Center. So remember that day very, very clearly, and what we had to do to bounce back and what happened there. Obviously, a lot of these things are different, but and then I chose to start bootstrap my own company at the tail end of the last financial recession. So I'm kind of tired of these scenarios, but as a bootstrap startup, you know, we've had to take this kind of lean approach, and you know, I've been working virtually most of my career, so in the day-to-day, it's not that much of an adjustment, but you know, having to employ some of those things that we didn't think we would be doing, you know, 9 years into a business, but glad to have everyone here today. There's a lot of energy and creativity, and like you said, I love being in this business, and I have no doubt that we're all going to pull together.
That's great. Leroy, you were talking about your Brighter Days Ahead campaign, and that was, I know that was one thing we wanted to get to because you've set up a great opportunity for your partners there to take advantage of these assets that you've created, right? And obviously it's a little bit of thinking, it's certainly now, but it's also a forward-thinking message too. Talk to us a little bit about that and how your partners have responded and what kind of engagement you're seeing there.
Yeah, so I think, you know, pretty quickly, everybody said, you know, a lot of DMOs said we've got to create some type of video, right? And we all did that landscapey video with the narrative. We wanted to take that a step farther, and with that video launched a toolkit that included assets, downloadable assets. You know, that video, that destination video was in there, but also e-signatures, email signatures, and digital assets for email campaigns or for their website. And again, unbranded. You know, we didn't put the Visit St. Pete Clearwater logo on everything because we've got 24 municipalities. So the city of Gulfport, for instance, that's not in our name, doesn't want our logo on, their branded materials. So really stripping our brand from it, but building a platform that they can really get behind. We've seen some great responses, some hotels even putting it on their marquee, brighter days ahead. And we are working on a webinar. I know webinars have become all the rage, and here we sit on one.
Yeah.
I think what we're really trying to do is bring forward creative ideas for our partners to be able to leverage that platform, understanding that a lot of staffs have been furloughed and they may not have a ton of resources right now, but here are some very easy things you can do with this campaign, especially a simple hashtag on your social media posts. But I think that's often one of the biggest challenges for our partners is, what do you say in these moments? What do you do? And that's a difficult question to answer. We've tried to answer that for them with brighter days ahead. Stay positive. It's not a sales message.
Right.
And to be able to, feature, again, that sunshine that's a common thread at the heartbeat of our destination.
Yeah, no, I love that. And have you gotten any kind of feedback from your partners that either unexpected, like, you know what I mean, in ways in which has just been unexpected for you as the DMO?
Nothing unexpected yet, but I do think, and I know it feels like we've been in this for a long time, I do think we're still very early in this project. I mean, we've got still the rest of April, and I know, kind of everybody wants to keep talking about a date, but this platform, I think we see it as our marketing. Once we start to ramp that up too, I mean, it's much easier to go back into market with paid channels. We're not doing that now, right? We're paused with paid. We're using this across our own channels. But as we start to reintroduce paid marketing, maybe that's our national NPR buy. Maybe that's some in-state stuff. We have elements and assets that we will be firing back up over the next month to 8 weeks. And this gives us a nice toe in the water before we ramp back up to full-fledged sales mode. So I think it's a little early still too, but I'm optimistic we'll continue to hear more and more from our partners and perhaps be surprised at some of the creative ways they're leveraging it.
I love that you have created that and positioned it in a way to be with option to even be longer term. I think that is so key, right? Because we don't know. We're still, even though I love that you mentioned it, it does feel like this new normal has been, a day feels a week and a week feels like a month already. You know what I mean? It really is. It does have that sense to us. So doing something,
we know the battles staying top of mind, right? We all know that. Amidst this very difficult time, we don't want to be necessarily forgotten, trying to drive awareness and using a positive message to be able to do that. You're able to to be productive, but also cautious and cognizant of everything that's happening around us.
And Andi, you were talking about similar. I love that you guys have created this kind of this idea around the hometown tourist, right? Similarly, looking to engage your locals and help, not just help them in the short term, but empower them to become your best messengers looking forward too. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, it was actually, a campaign from 5 years ago where it was encouraging the locals to get out and discover their own city. So, I mean, locals have always and always will be your best advocates. So ensuring that they know what it is that's there and available to them has been pushes in the past. So now taking what we've already had in place and looking, we know that once it's okay to get out and start traveling, that's going to really start on a local front. So having something in place for them to latch on and give them some guidance in getting out into the community. Definitely having to, restructure it as to what that looks like when we have a better feel for it. Restaurants are going to change, I'm sure, the way that, when it first starts okay to go back to zoos or museums, it's going to be considerably different. So working with them quite a bit as we can to understand what that will look like, so we can have that prepared and have something for people to latch onto to safely get back out and be those initial tourists for us is definitely something that we're trying to work out right now and get in place for planning ahead.
Have you guys come up with any kind of anticipated timeline for how y'all might roll that out?
You know, right now, I think it could play in a lot with what we're doing right now, because we're already asking our locals to essentially be our visitors, to take the place of that money that's going into takeout, delivery, restaurants, donating and getting out and doing the museum visits virtually, the downloading or going into art classes through our art museums and things like that. So a lot of what we'd be rolling into is already in place and what we're already relying and asking them to do. So I think in terms of timeline, putting that in place to have around what we're doing virtually already, so that when it transitions to the, okay, go out and actually visit these places. Now it's already kind of packaged in that hometown tourist, that messaging around it, and kind of go from there. It's still fairly in those beginning thoughts. We've been really reactionary still. So now it's getting to that phase of, we don't know exactly what that budget will look like. There's still so many unknowns. So trying to be as prepared for it as possible and at least have those ideas in place.
Yeah, Ted, you were talking too. I love this. And earlier in the week, for those that are attending, you know, we got on a call and we were talking about some prep stuff and you know, what are we seeing, what are we observing, and that's how I love that you're talking about how do we think and foster local demand? How do we think about loyalty? There's a great question, you know, in the chat about incentives and what should we be actually thinking and doing for those on the call?
Yeah, I mean, in the category of kind of what I would like to see come out of this, when we have a chance to reset and to do things differently, you know, we're so focused on trying to bring that demand from the outside in. And I think, you know, just from practical terms, you know, the more likely demand we're going to have in the short term is going to be local. You know, we talked about things being hyper local last week. But then also just in terms of taking care of our local partners, right? The restaurants, the venues, the activity providers, et cetera. How can we generate that local demand in the short term? And maybe in terms of incentives, maybe there are, you know, some ways that you could create sort of, you know, like a pass or something, or a coupon or something that could engender future loyalty or future visit, much in the way that like maybe your local health gym or something like that tries to get you to buy gift certificates for future visits or something like that. Could you tie that into some of your local partners? And then not only that in the short term, but in the longer term, let them be your voice, right? I mean, let that be, you know, we always talk about authenticity, et cetera, but, you know, there's an opportunity really here to, instead of having influencers coming in, you know, as arbiters of taste and trotting all over your destination and your venues and everything, you could take someone and have them be a local ambassador, use them to be the voice as you come out of this and telling their story and helping connect, you know, in the longer term, even because this is going to be a process.
Yeah. I love that. I was sharing with some friends the Visit Norfolk video example, and that, I mean, I was like hashtag all the feels with that one. I don't know if y'all have seen that. We should post a link to that if we can get it in the chat for everyone to see that, because it was beautiful. I think Bill Geist actually was the one that shared it with me, and it's incredible to think about. One, we're dealing with the tone, we're dealing with the climate and the challenge around what we're all going through. While also trying to plan for, you know, some kind of future that we just don't know when, right? And that's an incredibly different time. It's incredibly difficult to know what to do. And there is some, you know, trepidation around, well, I don't want to say the wrong thing, right? So how do we steward that well with our partners? How do we do that collectively?
Yeah, I'll be honest, that we've really opened up our social channels. And I think, you know, for a long time, we've viewed them as being very tight. They're very curated. And that's great, because that's what we're here for. We're able to really customize content and bring exactly what we want and what tone. We've opened it up. We're playing loose. We're highlighting local artists who are doing their own lives with watch parties on Facebook. And Ted, you talk about leveraging locals to tell that story. If you're not doing that as a DMO, or you have never done it, now is the time. We're trying, and it's tough. I get it. Staffs have been cut, budgets have been cut, and it takes time to coordinate those efforts. But I know that there are restaurateurs, there are attractions, there are local influencers or artists trying to drive their own buzz right now, and you can help shine a spotlight on them by doing a watch party, or giving them a call and going live together. Help them write a script maybe, or walk them through it. You can also do Facebook Lives with taped recorded video, which is a nice little hack. that you still get the, drive the attention to that Facebook Live, but you have a little bit more control over the content. If you're a little bit nervous about that local artist, maybe dropping an F-bomb or something. But, I think let it rip. Now is the time to test and try that stuff on social if you haven't, and don't try not to be as nervous. I know I can just speak from our own, channels. It can be tough sometimes to loosen the reins, and now's the time to do that.
Yeah, and there was one question that came in from Kevin. I think everyone could see it, but we kind of talked a little bit about this last week. But the question for you guys, for the panelists, is what steps will destinations and tourism-related businesses need to take to address traveler anxieties and ensure traveler safety, since we're all worried about that?
That's a great question. Who wants to jump at that one? Andy, yes.
Well, that's not fair. I think that first off, those conversations need to be taking place with your partners, understanding what their comfort is, understanding how they're preparing to better be able to put that messaging in place. It makes no sense to drive out your own messaging, bring people in, and have it be kind of a complete disaster when they start going to these places. That's just going to increase the anxiety. So I think rolling in and understanding the different steps that attractions, restaurants have taken, and including that in some form or in some way, shape, or form into your messaging, because there is going to be a lot of anxiety when people start getting out and about into the community. And looking at what it is that those partners need from you in terms of, whether that's help with guidance and understanding what they should be doing, or helping to craft what their messaging looks like. A lot of our partners right now are so on top of their game and have switched their platform so quickly that I'm not terribly worried about them on that respect. But yeah, I think that it's going to become a little bit clearer as things continue to progress to understand what that's going to look like. It's such a tough question to answer right now. Thanks for having me go first.
Ted?
Yeah, I mean, I was actually thinking about that earlier, is that, after kind of 9/11, we had, the shoe bomber and everything. So all of a sudden everybody has to take off their shoes, and we go through, this security process, and, psychologically we maybe feel safe, and that's kind of address that. And in this situation, I mean, I don't think there's a, kind of like one thing that could be done to kind of be a visible symbol. I mean, you're not going to have like a little Dyson like hand washer, as soon as you enter somewhere. But I mean, people are going to want to know, what's your status? I mean, do you have the antibodies? People are going to be taking more precautions. But I think something that was mentioned last week also is, I think it's a good time to really get to know your customers better. Who are the ones that are going to be those kind of early adopter types that will visit first, and maybe they will be less likely to stay, unfortunately, at a larger hotel to mix in public. Maybe they want to go to an alternative accommodation. There's a couple of different ways this could go, so that they can kind of disinfect it themselves, because they'll only trust themselves, rather than the opportunity that chain or larger hotels have to create some sort of a certification program on that. But all those, like, the hygiene and the cleanliness, all of those things are going to have to be touched upon in a very credible, real manner.
Yeah, I know through, some of what we have seen at Streetsense, we've got, this destination accelerator, basically, that we work with destinations to think these things through. So on the restaurant side and the partner side, we're seeing things like preparing our partners to think about how do you apply distance? How do you apply contactless type of things? Do you use single-use menus? Do you shift to now a digital-based menu, right? Lots of different applications into thinking through that. But if you go from a restaurant to an attraction, what do you know what I mean? You go through that consumer experience and have to take into consideration the ideas that are certainly becoming more prevalent around safety, cleanliness, what risk, again, the risk that the consumers will feel, right? And so that's certainly from those that might not know your brand, right? They might not know or might not be familiar with your destination. Like all of you have said, this shift toward a hyper local, thinking about our hometown tours, thinking about those that we can activate quickly. They might be familiar. There's a great question going, from one of our guests, the attendees here, about educating the locals about all of these things, which there's never been a greater time. I mean, we're seeing this all over the place. There's never been a greater time for DMO leaders to jump at this opportunity and position themselves as leaders, right? On behalf of the income and the economic impact that tourism creates for these bedroom communities. There's no doubt about that. So you can do that through, hosting webinars for yourself, right? Think about who are the partners that you can partner with, in whether it's local media, city officials, whoever, right? And began doing that even locally for yourself, just to generate some of these distribution channels, these conversation channels, and cultivate that kind of local based network.
Yeah, we've long debated what that M and DMO means, right? I mean, this is an opportunity to really set forth that management definition of that and help. I think that, as we move from this lockdown phase to reopen to vaccine, there's a large period of time in there that we have to help partners understand what that could look like. Obviously, they're going to be the ones implementing, but we have to help manage what those expectations could be and really help educate, pulling tables out, pulling chairs out. And Ted, you talked about some of it. I know Skift has covered Singapore's new, hotel checklist to be certified through their cleanliness program. You have to meet these 6 very specific standards, and that's what we're going to need to be, thinking about. And Josh, I think you touched on some creative examples, but you're right. We need to lead by example here as a DMO to help our industry come out of this, not just thinking, how can we, cram as many people in here as possible to pay our bills, but let's do this responsibly so that we can stay open a little bit longer and avoid being right back in the same spot in a month or two or however long. Yeah,
absolutely. The other challenge, obviously, this is another good question brought in the chat here, is around funding. So many destinations are obviously clearly tied to a lodging tax model, right? They're tied. Some other destinations, have other benefits, whether it's a restaurant tax or use taxes or other things like that. But clearly, this is also presenting us with the opportunity to rethink that and in creative ways. Has anybody here heard of any kind of creative ways being brought to the table now to help answer that question for Kate?
We haven't figured out any creative ways yet. We are a DMO that is funded through the lodging tax as well. So, I mean, the next year is we're going to have to get more creative with more than likely smaller staffs and much more intentional in terms of, what else can a source be for us in terms of revenue. That's something that we really haven't addressed. Again, still just kind of reacting and figuring out. It's still so early as to what next steps are for us in that respect. But I mean, we're creative people. So, it'll be a challenge, but we're good at that when it comes to figuring and being able to answer those questions and being smarter with the very limited dollars and for some staff that we have available.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, go ahead, Ted.
No, I was just going to say, I think there's a large, obviously not speak from a DMO perspective, but from a strategic perspective, speaking about this hyper-local and taking care of the local businesses, part of that is, I think there's an opportunity to reduce sort of the tension between, visitor and local. And I think if we incorporate locals by supporting these local businesses, by getting them involved in this whole kind of broader recovery effort, I think that generally they would probably be more likely to help, whether it's part of, if it's part of their overall taxes that they pay locally, if they see overall benefits to the community. And I think there's a chance and an opportunity to establish some of those bonds where you can perhaps, obviously not make it all up in one fell swoop, but at least test that as potential area.
Yeah, and I would say, I know, on the Streetsense side, in partnership with CBRE, we're certainly exploring a lot of alternative funding models right now. There's, I know Civitas is out there. John is doing a great job with them and leadership. They were mentioned in the chat here too. Let me ask you guys about this. This is a great question. It's come up a few different times. I mean, for me, in my seat, having been on the DMO side and now obviously working and coming alongside lots of different DMOs, this is a no-brainer to me. But I'd love to get you guys' perspective on this. Is how do you see this? How do you see DMOs now working across industry lines? I know so many DMOs have great Main Street organizations, or they've got local bids, or chambers, right? EDCs, economic development councils, whatever it is, right? They may be called something differently in every destination. But I mean, and again, this is why we created the accelerator at Streetsense, but it is to help foster really good, healthy, and sustainable integration for all those. But what are you guys seeing, or what are you hearing, or how are you even experiencing it in your own backyard right now? You coming crossing those lines, et cetera, or whatever.
Yeah, it's challenging. I'll tell you. I mean, we've got 13 chambers locally. We've got 24 municipalities. We've got a complex region, even once you move out of Pinellas County, St. Pete, Clearwater into Tampa and Tampa Bay. And so I think what these opportunities do, there's no doubt, is allows you to at least knock down some of those walls, to have jump on calls. And I'll be honest, I mean, I'm having calls with our EDC for the first time in my 8 years at our organization. And so that's a weekly call with county communications, who, again, that relationship hasn't even really been there at the county level, because we're kind of off doing our thing. So, at least locally, I think, just personally, the hope is that those types of relationships and those types of, the ability to work together and be more regional, maybe, the hope is that they can continue after this, not just lean on it in this moment. I think, we are a larger DMO. We're fortunate with our visitation and resources, but if you're smaller, I mean, regionalizing, and we've got I know there are a lot of smaller DMOs around the country. I mean, band together, create efficiencies, get with your EDC, find your chamber, and cut down on those duplicative efforts. I understand now more than ever, everybody wants to show their value because it's a difficult time. But expecting a partner to maybe pay 2 or 3 different chamber dues and then your membership fee with the DMO, I mean, those are high expectations during a very difficult financial time.
We, as a smaller DMO, we've been working at that at the last couple of years already, is establishing, that working relationship with our EDC, our downtown community partnerships, our local chamber as well. And this is maybe a silver lining of everything. Like, those organizations have done a fantastic job here, banding together and trying to avoid those duplicate efforts, making sure, here's what our strength is right now. This is what we can bring to the table, and really understanding that, putting it on a very united front. And there's been some, and are still in the works of, some really great things that have come out of that in joining forces rather than each man fighting for their own place at the proverbial table, so to speak, right now, I guess. But it's been a really good working relationship for a smaller DMO.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I'll just highlight one I know that is doing that very well is Greenbrier County in West Virginia. They've created a whole new tourism partnership, basically, with the Airport Authority, the Greenbrier Resort, Greenbrier Sporting Club, the CVB, and local officials. So through that, I think, and many I just know because we've been working with them. For them, many of these conversations have been the first that they've had. Like you were talking about, Leroy, and I go, if you're on this call and you find yourself in a very similar situation where you've not necessarily had those kind of relationships or ongoing meetings, start them, right? I mean, literally start them now. Invite all of those people to the table, have a virtual Zoom meeting, and create a regular cadence to at least be in front of one another and think about how you can partner together, because you're going to need each other. I mean, your destination, the vibrancy of your destination certainly is not a siloed thing, right? The consumer comes, the traveler comes in, they love what they experience, whatever they want to go naturally, tell other people about it. But it takes everybody working together to create that, for sure. Ted, you look like you were about to jump in there.
No, I was reading some of the comments, but yeah, absolutely. I mean, just the opportunity to establish and have those conversations, and look at things from a visitor's perspective. So you talked about more regionalism. Everyone's so kind of focused on, differentiating themselves and putting forth, what's the best thing about their particular destination. That's absolutely necessary. But I do think that, you know, on a macro level, looking at things, okay, the tourist is coming into this particular region, what makes sense for them on a macro level, and on a micro level, I mean, talking about preparing, you know, one little thing that people could do is just make sure you could enter doors without touching anything, or just look, you know, and that's where, like, you know, DMO naturally thinks of from the traveler's perspective, you know, go through your destination and say, okay, what could I do if I was super paranoid, didn't want to touch something, you know, how could I get by? And, you know, a commenter had brought up kind of mobile payments, and, you know, you're kind of hesitant to like touch that screen now, you know, so if you have a contactless, you have Apple Pay or card or something like that, you know, how do you roll that out a little bit more so you can, you know, anticipate those concerns up front and prepare for them?
Yeah, that's really good. Actually, that was going to be the perfect question. Matt looks like was asking, right? It seemed like mobile digital payments would be increasingly important, but how do we think about cash? How do we serve our business districts in this way? And I think, Ted, you just hit the nail on the head. It's by serving for the voice of the tourist, right? I mean, we put ourselves in that seat of understanding that, you know, the visitor economy so well, understanding the visitor experience so well. That's one great way we can come alongside our partners.
Yeah, and I think I take a lot of personal, like I put a lot of personal pressure on myself and carry this forward as a DMO. Like that's where we need to step in and make sure that we're helping educate our attractions, our partners. I mean, silver lining, and I think I love, Andy, you mentioning that there's an opportunity with relationships, but also to look at your business operations, not just what items aren't selling on the menu, but how can we reconstruct this entire consumer experience? And one of my biggest fears, you know, locally, I'll be honest, is a lot of places have been terribly creative, amazingly creative with to-go options and curbside pickup and finding ways to really get it done. When these restrictions are relaxed, don't throw that stuff out the window.
Yeah.
Like let's not take steps backwards. And again, I don't know, maybe too passionately feel, I mean, that's where we have to step in and really make sure that we're encouraging these restaurateurs and other partners that this isn't just a light switch that we flip. There's going to be phasing, and don't just try to get back to normal or get back to what you knew, which is comforting. I get it. And we've got bills to pay, but we really, really have to caution them to lean into the things you've done to get by in this moment and rethink that customer journey.
So we got a great question here from Alfredo. Ted, I think I'd love to get your feedback on this first, and then maybe we can toss it around, certainly, because it'd be good perspective, Leroy, from you. You're certainly at one side of a destination, and Andy, you're from another. So I think we can, you know, let's try to catch both ends of the spectrum here. But, you know, how do we as DMOs not overwhelm the distribution channels with everyone doing the same to stay relevant? I think that is a really great question. Ted, how do you see that, and how are you giving advice right now?
Well, first of all, I thought part of the deal was that we weren't going to let Alfredo into this, but, you know, I tried, but anyways, he's stuck in somehow. Hey, Alfredo. No, so I think it gets back to that question of, you know, there's not going to be like an off and on switch, right? So you're right, people are going to be flooding in, and then, you know, media costs are going to be a lot higher, and you're just going to be kind of, wait a minute, I thought there's some sort of opportunity here. And the opportunity here is to kind of start now with sort of like these micro contacts or these micro relationships, and establishing them now and having a conversation that's relevant and respectful now, so that you're not kind of all rushing in. And I think that's where you can kind of help differentiate yourself. And the way to do that is not through kind of like more mass campaigns, but kind of like honing back in, like we talked about, those people who have visited before, and you know, finding out, you know, who are your most loyal repeat visitors, or who are the ones that are most, you know, adventurous and that will come back, and really preparing little small kind of micro you know, campaigns or communication strategies around that, so that we're not all rushing in. I mean,
all of our customer is unique to us. I mean, right? I mean, to a certain degree, that my customer is not, my visitor is not who's necessarily that Andy's targeting all the time. And certainly seasonality plays a big part into that. So I think it starts with research, you know, something we're working on right now. Shout out to all the data partners, Adara, Arrivalist, they're doing a lot of great work and making a lot of data available to everybody. I think one of the challenges is at the DMO level is we have very little specific data for St. Pete Clearwater right now. And we have to wait, 6 weeks to get bed tax, and STR is only so good. It's hard to really understand what our customer, the St. Pete Clearwater visitor, is thinking about us. So we're commissioning some research. I get it. Not everybody has those dollars to do that, but to really try to understand our in-state visitor, and then some key feeder markets. What are they thinking about us? What are they thinking about travel? And what are they thinking about potential restrictions or items in place to help mitigate, whether that be a mask or test or whatever that might be. So I think it starts with research, and then from there, whatever that data tells us, leaning into knowing who our previous customers were. Ted mentioned it, and I think, again, depending on budget, you can lean into third-party vendors to help you understand and target your past visitors. And then smaller budgets, and not to jump in on Andy, but every DMO should have some own data. We should all have email lists, and that's a very free beginning, in my opinion.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely honing in on that free keyword free for the time being, and hoping that as things let up and we move into 2021, 2022, that comes back and we can start really investing in those awesome data research companies again. In the meantime, for smaller DMOs, it is looking at what you already have in place, really diving into those analytics. Who is it that is visiting your site? What is it that they're looking at? And then having our partners have very useful data. I think that moving forward with, rather than, trying desperately to throw out as much free messaging as possible and hoping something sticks, is approaching it as strategically and as possible. So working with some of our larger attractions to compile our data with theirs, see what that tells us, and get very specific with our messaging to those kind of with their joint campaigns or what have you. But I can say for a smaller DMO, I'm not sure when we'll be able to pick back up with paid campaigns and large pushes like that. So the more collaborative we can be with the partners, and the more creative, and again, we're marketers, we're good at it. So it's just really getting those conversations going and using what we have.
Love the idea of data co-op with your partners. I mean, if there's ever a better time to do that. And I think we oftentimes find hurdles, right, on either side, maybe, of ways to not make that work. I mean, our hotels need visitors. You have potentially platforms that they can help leverage, combine that data. Obviously, you've got to, watch out for some of the privacy issues and things like that, but that's a great idea.
And I love the idea too, being that as, people outside of the local, when you start reaching into your drive markets, look towards who are the DMOs and who are those people in those drive markets. There have been some really fun creative campaigns in the past with those DMOs working together, being really playful and what that message is. But identify those people, have the communications of what they're seeing in their market, and understand if there's any cross promotion or teamwork that can be done from a drive market standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. I think too, in determining your previous visitors and how you can go about them. There's a great question from Leslie here about using receptives in your area as a resource. Leroy, I think that speaks back to obviously the data co-op, right? I mean, certainly leveraging all of those tools that you have access to. And I love that you brought up email too. Every destination that's on the call or attraction should have access to their own first party data, which is those that have given you permission by signing up on through your database, right? So if you collect that database, think about running, very easy kind of surveys to them and ask, create a feedback loop through there, right? Have you visited? And if you have, what was your favorite thing, right? And there you go, as a very easy and free way to segment that and begin a campaign to activate them for you in a kind of recovery.
A lot like social, let it rip. I mean, that's like now more than ever, again, I mean, leverage that stuff. Again, we hold the email list very close to our vest. We protect it, but you know, and obviously you really have to get the messaging and tone right, but lean into that.
Yeah, I mean, it's an opportunity to really to try to create the first party data that doesn't really exist now, right? And that can involve looking at your local partners. If you're talking about bringing local or drive markets involved, talk to some of the restaurants, talk to them about, you know, when they see people come into town, is it, you know, is it just weekends, or what are some of the things, some of the anomalies that might stand out there, just to kind of brainstorm or get an idea. But that's actual, you know, visits, that's first party data rather than surveys, because surveys in such, you know, things can change, are changing daily now, and based on what happens that day could determine someone's feedback. So, you know, unless that survey is very recent or it's uncovering things that are going to survive all the vicissitudes that are going on right now, it gets very, very difficult.
Yeah, we got another, I mean, we got a few minutes left here, but we got about 10 minutes left before the end. Certainly, there's two things I know we wanted to cover. Certainly one was, you know, what we're seeing now in communicating plans publicly, you know, not just to our, you know, to our partners, to our locals, but showing, you know, the leadership we're taking in answering the concerns of what's going to happen. How do we as a destination respond to, you know, certainly over-tourism, like we were talking about over-tourism a few weeks ago, right? And now we're thinking something totally different. So how do we think about that in terms of developing plans, communicating that, and what have you guys seen, and what are you doing right now?
It's a great question. I know that I saw, and just a really quick piece that I saw, the St. Pete mayor was getting pushed to shut down Central Avenue in downtown St. Pete and turn it into a pedestrian area. And his very astute comeback was, I am not trying to create more gathering areas during this event right now. It's something definitely we're going to look into down the road. But, you know, you bring up a very interesting challenge of destinations not being able to have it both ways. Yeah. We can't, you know, complain about not having people, and then we can't also complain about over tourism. I mean, it's a challenging dynamic, and I think everything that we need to do should be done responsibly. And don't have a ton of examples locally, and maybe Ted or Andy.
Over tourism isn't it's not a problem that we've dealt with a lot in the past, so I can't really speak to that. You know, in answering some of the questions right now, or maybe I misinterpreted that question of what we're doing right now to help. And this kind of goes back to working with your chambers and your EDCs, is like healthcare workers. We're talking with a lot of hospitals right now who have all of this information coming and requests coming to them about, you know, I want to donate. What can I do? I want to buy pizza for the workers, which is kind of a big no right now. You can't have food coming in and out of a hospital with deliveries. So it's working with those different entities, setting up how can we put together a means for people to do this that also supports other, like the restaurant industry, gives people a way to donate, to help, and, you know, brings all of these different entities together. We've done a lot of different initiatives like that we're putting together to answer those now questions. I am interested and curious to see if moving forward, I've noticed that within a lot of these research studies, what's the travel sentiment looking like? People are still excited to go to beaches and the big resorts, but then that number two is considering more of those rural destinations, smaller areas, wide open air. We have a lot of that. So we're definitely going to try to relay some of that messaging around what is there in North Dakota, Minnesota, and specifically in Fargo-Moorhead, and which we're in both of those states, as to what there is to experience on those fronts. I, again, can't really speak to over tourism, but looking at what that research is telling us for moving ahead, that is definitely something that we're going to work into our overall messaging, and which hasn't been a big thing that we've done in the past because we're a pretty urban community. But
yeah, I think, I mean, having lived in Barcelona a couple of years, which is kind of like the epicenter of over tourism, I do think that there's an opportunity now to help prepare for that. And Andy, like you said, you know, you may not have that issue now, but it also can help just even on a micro level, if it's a very popular attraction or a museum or something like that, of how do you kind of maybe time the visits. I mean, these are, or just kind of stagger things. You know, in some of the museums, you have to sign up for the more popular ones a certain time to go in. I mean, these are, in the end, they're mathematical problems that can be solved. It's just like we just haven't done it, right? I mean, why not space things out? It'll be a much more enjoyable experience for everyone. Could that be extrapolated to like the beach? And I mean, and in terms of involving the locals, could there be like, you know, locals hours or a local section of the beach versus other? I mean, there's a lot of different creative ways of kind of solving that tension between locals as well as visitation, and the impact that visitation has on over tourism. There was someone in my local community that was advocating for shutting down the main street so that people could have more distance to walk. And it was kind of 50-50. People are like, no, I'm driving, like, because everyone feels safe in their cars now too, right? So that's another consideration. But what a beautiful experience to have some of these kind of closed off walkways that are possible. I think now, if any time, if you ever wanted to or were thinking about doing them, now's the time to strike with such a plan. And I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think people are going to want that or expect it now anyways.
Yeah, there's a question about again, another great question from Alfredo. Thanks for dropping that in there for us. But around, you know, a hesitancy from locals, from these different interagencies and different, you know, stakeholders who we would call stakeholders, and certainly important to the dialogue that we would need to have at the table, right? And we understand. I mean, Leroy, you've said it earlier. Andy, you did as well, about, you know, making sure that we you know, prove our value and are being seen and are being relevant and being seen as helpful and stuff. And there are many destinations that have a challenge currently within their current plans, right? And I think we all are, for sure. But in thinking about an over-tourism, many times, you know, we develop these plans on behalf of our destination, and they're kind of built in silos because we haven't had necessarily input from people that should have been given input, right? And I think, Ted, to your point, now is a perfect opportunity to invite more people to the table, more voices, and create a more sustainable plan for what we would do in the future, right? Because at the end of the day, you know, some stakeholders may in fact say, you know what, you're saying we want X number of visitors, but we don't think that's sustainable because of what it does to the local economy or what it does to the visitor experience, or et cetera, whatever, right? And so that's just really, really important to foster those dialogues right now, and then create a strategy to you know, communicate that outward. And I think that's one way to speak directly to Alfredo's question here. That's one way that we can perhaps win people over to our side. Not that it's about sides even, but it's one way to perhaps engage those that haven't been fans of tourism in a new way.
I think, though, I'll be honest, and I think all of that sounds really good. The dollar is hard to ignore, and I think, you know, for us at least, I can speak about our local situation. I mean, you're right. You build aggressive marketing plans. You grow a destination, but yet you're not really talking about transportation solutions. You're not talking about overall, you know, initiatives that can help the whole region. But it's going to be hard. You're going to be hard pressed to try and limit people's expectations to get back to where we were 6 weeks ago from a production, visitation, economic impact, dollars perspective. And I get it. It takes difficult conversations and certainly ambitious plans to get there. But I mean, that's going to be really difficult to do. And I think, I personally think that's responsible and smart in taking advantage of this really terrible situation we've been put in. But, you know, realities have been built around that success, and it's going to be really challenging to break those realities that everybody, you know, desperately wants back.
Yeah, agreed.
And kind of the other side of the table on that, where it's, I mean, being in a destination where your locals don't really think of you as being a tourist destination. That's, again, never been a problem for us. Now that all of those dollars are missing of what the visitor actually does bring in, I think that it's a really good time to be able to touch on, this is actually the impact that visitors have. This is how important it is to our community. That is, it's a great time to be able to help people understand or prove that value, if you will, from a destination, again, who's not a big tourist destination.
Yeah. No, that's really important, I think, because certainly every destination right now is feeling the impact of the lack of the visitor dollar, right? So specifically, the visitor economy is suffering tremendously inside of our destinations, and we're able to see some grassroots efforts, Great American Takeout. We're seeing some ways that we can, infuse some vibrancy from locals. But you can start to really see, what's missing in that delta, right, is the visitor economy side of that. So, and that's Leroy, what you're saying, what we've been expecting and what we experienced before and think about as normal. I think, we keep saying this. Will has certainly said this so eloquently, but we do need to be able to put that aside because we are entering into a new normal. And the idea to think that we're going to go back somehow is not going to be helpful to any of us. We really do need to think about how do we engage moving forward as best we can. Any other, we just got about a minute or so left here. Any other closing thoughts, you guys? First, thanks to all the questions. You guys have been great. We really appreciate all the questions and stuff like that. I do know, Becca, you're going to be sending a follow-up email, correct, with a recording, so attendees share that if they want.
Yeah, that should go out to, tomorrow we'll have an email with the webinar recording. Feel free to share with your colleagues, your peers. Also check out connecttravel.com webinars. We have all of our upcoming webinars, not only on the marketing side, but also the travel trade side. And we did have one more question come through real quick if you guys have a couple more minutes. From Bill, he says historically he's had trouble attracting people from 40 miles away. Or he's had more trouble attracting people from 40 miles away than from 400 miles away. So how do you guys feel that this post-COVID will change perceptions?
I mean, I think leaning on that data and research to help us answer that question, and so that we don't just rely on kind of that historical gut feeling or whatnot. I mean, for us, and again, every destination is very different. For us, Tampa Bay has always been our bread and butter. Orlando is huge for us. In-state is massive for our destination. So I'm not quite sure that's the case for us locally. Certainly, it's easier to get somebody to stay longer and spend more if they're farther away. And so that's something that we're weighing as we come out of this, into remarketing, is we can't just necessarily completely get away from potentially those fly markets or redefining what you view as a drive market. And I think Zeke on this webinar really said it well. Use that data to help you define drive market. It might not be a market you think is a drive, but use the data to tell you that, because people are, all the sentiment and research we're seeing, people are going to be driving.
That's good. Andy, Ted, any closing thoughts?
I've got one, and well, I'm gonna let Andy go first.
Closing thoughts. I don't know if I have too many closing thoughts, but thank you to everyone out there. I've been digging through all of your websites. I've been trying to keep up with what everybody's doing. The peers are in this industry are such an awesome resource and great. So thank you to all of you.
I do have one thing, Andy, if you will deputize me, I'm going to take COVID-19 and I'm going to put it into my virtual wood chipper here.
I love it. Yes. That's perfect. I love it.
Unfortunately, it unplugged when I was trying to pull it from where it was. So.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Just pretend it was real.
I love
Great
it.
way to end.
Great to see you, friends. Obviously, great to see your smiling faces, and stay safe and stay healthy. And we'll see everybody. We're going to have another one next week. So we'll see you on that
Same
one.
time, same place.
Bye,
Thanks, guys.
Be well.
Sherry, you there?
I am here. I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar.
Thank you very
Awesome.
much.
Thank you,
Everybody.
guys.
Thanks, guys.